Donc, si les choses vont bien plus tard, ce sera notre dernière journée ensemble pour un petit bout. Au début de l'année, lorsque la session de printemps de la Chambre a commencé, j'ai dit que notre gouvernement s'engageait à travailler dur pour faire avancer les choses au Parlement. Notre gouvernement a fait avancer la Chambre avec un programme ambitieux de projets de loi qui amélioreront la vie des Canadiens et qui renforceront le Canada. Aujourd'hui, alors que la session tire à sa fin, j'ai le plaisir de dire que nous avons tenu notre promesse. Nous avons travaillé très fort pour les Canadiens et nous avons obtenu des résultats. Nous sommes fiers de ce que le gouvernement a pu accomplir, même en contexte minoritaire. Today, I'm joined by many of my colleagues, ministers whose bills are on track for passage by the House of Commons. It is an impressive list. We expect to have 15 bills passed in this House in 14 weeks. So let me just give you a quick recap of the legislative highlights. The 2024 budget, which provides fairness for every generation and includes a wide range of initiatives aimed at making life more affordable for Canadians, from housing to food for school children. The Fall Economic Statement, which helps create good jobs, builds more homes, and supports the middle class. Sustainable jobs, which will create good middle-class jobs across our country as we move towards a net-zero economy. Medical assistance in dying, which ensures the MAID system is measured, thoughtful, and compassionate. The Atlantic Accord, which helps set the foundation for the offshore renewable energy sector in Nova Scotia and in Newfoundland and Labrador. Child care legislation, which enshrines the principles of a Canada-wide early learning and child care system into law. Cybersecurity modernization, which bolsters cybersecurity for Canadians across the financial, telecommunications, energy, and transportation sectors. The National Council for Reconciliation, which ensures long-term progress on reconciliation with Indigenous peoples in Canada. The Public Complaints Commission for the RCMP and CBSA, which provides greater accountability and transparency in Canada's law enforcement and border services. Creation of the Miscarriage of Justice Review Commission through David and Joyce Milgaard's law, which improves the process for people who claim to have been wrongfully convicted. An amendment to the Chemical Weapons Convention Implementation Act, which underscores this country's commitment to work towards eliminating the use of chemical weapons globally. L'assurance médicaments, qui permettra à 9 millions de Canadiens d'être libres de leur santé sexuelle et reproductive et à plus de 3 millions de Canadiens atteints de diabète d'obtenir les médicaments dont ils ont besoin. L'interdiction des travailleurs de remplacement, qui protège le droit de grève des travailleurs et assure une plus grande stabilité lors des conflits de travail dans les secteurs touchant la juridiction fédérale. Et la lutte contre l'ingérence étrangère, qui modernise notre capacité à empêcher les forces extérieures d'interférer dans notre démocratie. Et finalement, l'accord de libre-échange entre le Canada et l'Ukraine, qui actualise et améliore nos relations commerciales avec l'Ukraine au moment où celle-ci se défend contre la Russie. Il s'agit d'une liste remarquable à tout point de vue. Elle montre que la Chambre des communes est un lieu où nous pouvons faire avancer les choses au nom des Canadiens. Il s'agit de l'un des gouvernements minoritaires les plus productifs dans les derniers quelques gouvernements minoritaires au Canada. Et nous sommes fiers de ces réalisations. I would like to thank MPs and all staff in the House of Commons for their contributions in the last few months, especially on those many, many days when the House sat until midnight. We succeeded here, despite continual partisan obstruction from the Conservatives, because we are determined to work hard for the people of this country. We're putting the interests of Canadians first. We did that throughout the spring sitting of this year, and we will continue to do that when the House returns in the fall. I'd now like to turn to my colleague, the Minister of Finance, Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Steve. Thank you to you and your team for how hard you have worked. And thanks also to all the journalists here. You guys have worked really hard too. It's a great record. We've accomplished a lot. With Parliament rising for the summer soon, today is an important opportunity to highlight the work our government is doing to deliver fairness for every generation. This work includes two important pieces of legislation that we expect will receive parliamentary approval in the coming days. The first is the Budget Implementation Act, which would put into effect many key measures from this year's budget. These measures include a plan to help make homes more affordable by helping millennial and Gen Z Canadians afford a home with more tax-free ways to save for that first down payment. Nous remettons également plus de logements sur le marché en sévissant contre les locations à court terme et en interdisant l'achat de logements canadiens par des étrangers. Nous faisons baisser le coût de la vie et nous renforçons le filet de sécurité sociale du Canada pour chaque génération. Nous élargissons le programme canadien d'exonération du remboursement des prêts d'étudiants au personnel de la santé et des services sociaux qui travaillent dans des communautés rurales et éloignées. Nous lançons un programme national d'alimentation scolaire et nous simplifions et réduisons le coût des changements du forfait d'Internet et du téléphone. Nous augmentons également les investissements et la productivité, notamment en accordant des importants crédits d'impôt à l'investissement pour la fabrication d'hydrogène propre et des technologies propres. Ces nouveaux crédits d'impôt vont attirer davantage d'investissements privés, créer plus d'emplois bien payés et stimuler l'économie. The second piece of legislation I'd like to highlight is the Fall Economic Statement Implementation Act. This includes important measures such as removing the GST on new purpose-built rental housing for eligible co-op housing projects, something we're really glad to put in place. It complements the action we took in the fall to lift the GST on new purpose-built rental housing. We're making the math work for builders by creating incentives for them to build more homes that would otherwise not move forward to construction. We're making generational changes to competition law in Canada. This change will help stabilize prices and provide more choice for Canadians. Nous supprimons la TPS et la TVH sur les services de counseling et de psychothérapie, afin que les gens puissent recevoir le soutien et les soins de santé mentale dont ils ont besoin. Nous offrons un crédit d'impôt à l'investissement pour le captage, l'utilisation et le stockage du carbone et un crédit d'impôt à l'investissement pour la fabrication de technologies propres. Et nous soutenons les travailleuses et les travailleurs canadiens en associant ces crédits d'impôt à l'investissement à des exigences en matière de main-d'œuvre. Ils vont inciter les entreprises à verser des salaires syndicaux en vigueur et à créer des possibilités d'apprentissage. Passing both the Fall Economic Statement Implementation Act and the Budget Implementation Act will therefore enshrine 4 major investment tax credits into law and give certainty to businesses that want to create good-paying jobs and bring more investment to Canada. This is a real milestone in our economic plan. I can't underscore how significant these 4 investment tax credits will be in setting the Canadian economy up for success in the long term. Really glad we finally will have these 4 pillars of our economic plan passed into law so businesses can 100% rely on them. These tax credits are going to create more good jobs for Canadians. They will attract more investment to Canada, and they will place Canada at the forefront of the global race to seize the economic opportunities of today and tomorrow. Passing these tax credits into law this month is a milestone for Canada and for our economic growth plan. All of these measures are based on a foundation of fiscal responsibility. Earlier this month, the Bank of Canada lowered interest rates, making Canada the first G7 country to do so. Another milestone. Interest rates are coming down because inflation is falling. Inflation fell to 2.7% in April, down from 2.9% in March. That's 4 months in a row that inflation has been within the Bank of Canada's target range. That is really good news for all of us. In fact, inflation has fallen to its lowest level in 3 years, and wage growth has now outpaced inflation for 15 months in a row. Last week, the IMF released its annual Article 4 review of the Canadian economy. And in that review, the IMF commended Canada's strong fiscal credibility and economic resilience. Specifically, the IMF commended our government for adhering to the fiscal guideposts we introduced in the 2023 Fall Economic Statement, which complement our government's fiscal anchor to reduce the debt to GDP ratio over the medium term. We met those markers in the 2024 budget. The IMF also recognized that the Canadian economy appears to have achieved a soft landing, avoiding a recession and the heartbreaking unemployment that many had thought was inevitable. This is a powerful endorsement of Canada's economy. It shows that our economic plan is fiscally responsible, and that really matters because it means that we can afford to make the investments and create the good jobs that Canadians need. Enfin, nous avons récemment déposé et fait adopter une motion pour améliorer l'équité fiscale pour tous les Canadiennes et Canadiens et pour mettre en œuvre des changements proposés dans le budget concernant l'impôt sur les gains au capital. Ces changements vont faire en sorte qu'un petit nombre de Canadiennes et de Canadiens bien nantis paieront un peu plus d'impôts sur les profits qu'ils vont faire s'ils vendent un investissement fructueux. Ces revenus vont servir à financer des investissements qui aideront tous les Canadiennes et Canadiens, en particulier les jeunes générations. Elles vont contribuer à financer les mesures dont je viens de parler et à réduire le coût de la vie pour les Canadiennes et Canadiens. Pierre Poilievre voted against the Budget Implementation Act. That means he voted against investments in housing, investments in childcare, and investments in healthcare. He voted against making our tax system more fair so that we can afford to invest in Canadians and deliver the opportunities younger Canadians deserve. Instead, he is choosing to defend a tax system that favors the wealthy. Pierre Poilievre and his Conservative Party have shown time after time after time that they are always on the side of those at the very top and always against working people in Canada. While the Conservative Party looks for any excuse to cut investments in Canadians, our government is acting now. We are getting laws passed, and we're doing it because we know that Canadians are counting on us. Thank you very much, and I think all of us are ready to answer your questions.
Hey, Minister Freeland, your government, CBC News has learned, is prepared to list the IRGC as a terrorist organization. What took you so long to come to that decision?
The regime in Iran is brutal, repressive, theocratic, and misogynist. Our government has taken strong action to counter that regime, and we are definitely focused on taking further action. I don't have anything further to announce, but as I think you know, the Minister for Public Safety will be speaking to you shortly. Yes.
Why didn't your government prioritize online harms? This legislation was promised since 2019. It's not even in committee.
Sure, if you want to. You could be very tall.
We, as you know, often allocate time in the House. We have lots of time for debate. I could give you statistics on various bills. But online harms, the clock simply ran out without us allocating time, and we were unable to get that to committee.
How come you didn't, like, I mean,
Because-
this
well, I
is
think it's
your
pretty clear.
government's answer to the rise in hate. You've
Yeah.
been promising it since 2019. The minister says, going to take a while to set up that regulator. Why not prioritize it to actually make it a reality?
I'm afraid that's a question you'll have to ask Mr. Poilievre, why his party is unable to commit to a proper debate, committee, witnesses, and moving that bill along. We are extremely eager to move C-63 into committee, hear from Canadians, and get it off to the Senate.
But it only got debated in June. You tabled it. It was tabled in February, second reading June. Why didn't you put it on your paper ahead of time?
Well, as I just laid out for you, 15 bills in 14 weeks is a pretty productive minority parliament.
If it was productive, but you were saying that it's the Conservatives' fault for holding things up, which is it?
It was both. We got a lot done in the time available to us. We had 14 weeks, passed 15 bills, including 2 major pieces of economic legislation and the 13 other pieces of legislation that I just laid out for you. We were able to debate it at second reading. As you all know, many of these discussions about how we advance bills occur with other House leaders. There is not a lot of appetite, I'm afraid, on the Conservatives' part to help us move that bill ahead.
So, looking at the legislative agenda coming back into September, what are you able to prioritize? What are Canadians expecting you to get back to work on? Because they're suggesting now that you're going off for 2 months and not doing anything. So what would your answer be to that?
What I would do, first of all, is point to a very strong balance sheet of accomplishment and promises kept. You know, we ran in the last election on a significant number of commitments. Those commitments are well on the way to being met, as well as the commitments that were made as part of our agreement with the New Democrats, the Supply and Confidence Agreement. We have kept our promises. We will continue keeping our promises. So while I cannot preview specific measures for you today in the fall, what I can tell you is we will be pretty ruthlessly focused on making lives better for Canadians in their daily life. That was our focus in every day of this session. Dental care, child care, housing, all of the measures the Minister of Finance has just laid out, we are going to continue very much with that philosophy as we enter the fall.
How come it's not resonating with Canadians? How come it's not none of this seems to be resonating with Canadians?
You know, when Canadians take stock, as they will over the summer, over a good barbecue, of how their lives have been positively impacted, couples saving tens of thousands of dollars on childcare costs, seniors getting dental care, many for the first time, and a new denture, people able to make ends meet specifically because of the measures put forward by this government. I believe that when Canadians do the tally, that they will understand that this is a government focused on their needs. Mr. Poilievre is an opposition leader focused on taking those things away.
But what makes you think Canadians want to
Vous avez presque fait toutes les lois avec lesquelles vous êtes engagé à faire avec le
Oui,
nouveau
merci.
Parti démocratique. Il reste presque plus rien à la liste. Pourquoi est-ce que ce deal-là continuerait pour une année supplémentaire?
Ben, nous avons une entente qui s'allonge jusqu'à juin, dans 12 mois, jusqu'à la fin juin 2025. Évidemment, il nous reste des choses à accomplir. Il nous reste des soins à longue durée, si je ne m'abuse, pour n'en citer qu'une. Nous sommes résolument, évidemment, avec eux, en train de cocher toutes les cases de notre entente. Mais, somme toute, nous avons pu mettre ensemble des appuis pour les Canadiens. Nous avons pu créer un legs. M. Holland, il m'étourdit là, à force de mettre en place des choses qui aident les Canadiens de façon concrète dans leur vie de tous les jours. Et ce sont des choses dont nous sommes très, très fiers et je pense que ça mérite d'être souligné.
Vous auriez rien changé au deal, juste rapidement? C'était avec rétrospective 2 ans.
Moi, j'applaudis tous ceux qui ont contribué à mettre en place cette entente-là, justement parce qu'on a pu, sur une assez longue période là, pour un gouvernement minoritaire, mettre en place des choses qui sont depuis très longtemps attendues, qu'on s'est engagé à faire depuis, dans certains cas, très, très longtemps, et qui vont justement aider les Canadiens dans leur vie de tous les jours. Les gens m'en parlent à tous les jours.
In September, the government is requiring public servants to be in the office minimum 3 days a week. Is there any thought for a minimum requirement for MPs? Because right now it's still unlimited hybrid sittings. Any thought of having MPs obliged to be in the House a certain number of days?
I don't have specific statistics for you, Bill, but I think anecdotally you can see that life has returned largely to normal in Parliament, that people are back sitting in their seats. I do not detect a loss of, a lack of will or interest to be here and participating in person in the work of Parliament, and I think that Parliament has returned, as most Canadians have, to the workplace.
Are you being happy when you return in the fall? Karina Gould's supposed to come back from mat leave next month. What's your plan?
Well, we all look forward to Karina's return. Karina is an exceptionally valuable member of this team, and for the rest, that's for the Prime Minister to decide.
Minister Freeland, I just wanted to ask you again about the IRGC. Once this is listed, what kind of financial assets are you expected to seize based off this?
So I do want to be very clear. This regime is brutal, it is repressive, it is misogynist, it is theocratic. Our government has taken firm action against the regime. We believe we need to constantly be looking at ways we can act further. We have taken significant moves on money laundering, as you saw in the budget, in the fall economic statement. Beyond that, the Minister of Public Safety is going to be out shortly today, and I'm not going to steal his thunder.
Mr. On capital gains, farmers are feeling targeted by the increase in the capital gains inclusion rate. Did these changes target people that you didn't intend on?
Thank you for the question. Let me just start by saying our government believes in fairness for every generation. We have put forward a budget that makes meaningful investments in things that Canadians need. Huge investments in housing, a pressing issue, especially for younger Canadians. Huge investments in affordability, things like dental care, things like early learning and childcare, things like free diabetes medicine and free prescription contraceptives. Huge investments in the productive capacity of our economy, and for today I'm going to highlight having those 4 tax credits passed into law. These are investments for today and for tomorrow. And we knew, I'm going to get there. We knew that we had to make these investments in a fiscally responsible way. We recognized that high interest rates were a huge challenge for Canadians and for the Canadian economy, and we recognized that the government had to do its part to help get inflation stabilized so that rates could come down. That meant we had to stick within our fiscal guideposts. We did that, and earlier this month we saw the Bank of Canada, making Canada the first country in the G7 to lower interest rates, which has already been so significant for so many Canadians. So if you need to make investments, and you need to do it in a fiscally responsible way, the way to finance them is through tax fairness. That is what we have done, specifically on farmers. I'm a farmer's daughter, I'm a proud farmer's daughter, and I am so proud of Canada's farmers who contribute so much to our country and who quite literally feed the world. Let me talk you through the ways in which this tax fairness measure has been very carefully designed. Hang on, has been very carefully designed to truly deliver tax fairness and truly to only focus on those who are the very wealthiest. So for farmers, we have increased the lifetime capital gains exemption. It is now $1.25 million. That means, say, for a farming couple, the first $2.5 million of capital gains is completely exempt from any tax, and that is higher than the current situation. On top of that, in every year, each person in Canada can make $250,000 in capital gains year after year after year before the new rate kicks in. That means an individual can make $2.5 million in capital gains over 10 years before they are touched by the new rate. A couple, $5 million. On top of all of those things, for a farming family, if they have founded the farm, they're going to qualify to be covered by the new Canadian Entrepreneurs Incentive, which didn't exist previously. We put that in place for the first time in the budget in order to truly create incentives for entrepreneurs, even as we made this move. Up to $6.25 million in capital gains, you are actually going to be better off under the new system than you were previously if you are a founding farmer or entrepreneur, and that is per individual. Okay, so for a couple, we're up now to $12.5 million. These are significant measures that were put in place because as we were designing this, we were careful. And it was really important for us to have this measure be very targeted, and I'm confident that that's what we've accomplished.
What makes you think Canadians are listening to you and anything your government is saying right now?
Because we are acting on the issues that matter the most to Canadians. Like, this is a very challenging time for Canadians. We have all collectively been through an incredibly challenging economic time for Canada and the world.
And it feels like successive polling is showing Canadians are looking for a change.
We have been through an incredibly challenging time for Canada and the world. We had COVID, we had the lockdowns, we had the Russian invasion of Ukraine, we had the global energy shock. We know that things are hard, and that is why we are acting with purpose on the issues that matter the most to Canadians. Housing, affordability with measures like dental care, child care, free diabetes medicine, free prescription contraceptives, and measures that are historic measures to build the Canadian economy, like the 4 investment tax credits that are going to be passed into law this month. Historic, and we're doing all of it in a fiscally responsible way, built on tax fairness, which is allowing our country to be the first country in the G7 where interest rates have come down. So our focus truly, and I think I speak for all of my colleagues here, we wake up in the morning, we sit in the House of Commons until midnight, sometimes we wake up in the middle of the night, really thinking about how this is a tough time. This is a historic time. It's a consequential time for Canada and for the world. And our focus is, what are the biggest problems Canadians are facing, and what can we do to help Canadians get through this? That's where our focus is.
Est-ce que au retour à l'automne, il y a une élection possible de Donald Trump? Est-ce que ça va aider le Parti libéral du Canada?
Merci pour la question. Une des responsabilités principales d'un gouvernement fédéral du Canada, c'est les relations avec nos voisins du Sud. Nous comprenons cela, le Premier ministre comprend cela, et c'est pour les Américains de choisir leur président. C'est pour nous de travailler avec le président démocratiquement élu aux États-Unis. La seule chose que je voudrais ajouter, c'est que notre gouvernement est exprimé. Nous comprenons comme travailler avec les présidents démocratiques et les présidents républicains aux États-Unis. Je veux souligner le travail de ma chère collègue Marianne, qui est avec moi, sur ce sujet maintenant. Et je veux vraiment assurer les Canadiens que nous sommes prêts pour toutes les éventualités aux États-Unis. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup.